Morning, folks. This morning I want to share what I would call an action adventure. You know, like one of them real good movies that keep you on the edge of your seat. And I do mean on the edge of your seat. This is a true story. This is a story that has been told by other people, but not the way I've told it. And the reason I tell it this way is because I was there when it happened. I participated in this action adventure. The reason I want to share this story because I want people to understand how exciting it is when you serve God, when you're in God's will. And I do mean exciting. You will experience things that you've never thought you would experience. The important thing is recognizing it as a place that you're at, a situation that you're in because of God. So I'm going to start back. I'm going to go back in history, in time, a pretty good ways. I don't remember the exact year. I just remember I was living in Miramar, Florida at the time, in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. We had 3 kids, 3 children, and I had a tree service. And at that point in my life, the tree service was going pretty good. And I had actually hired a young man to work for me, a hard worker. In his first couple days, I could see that he'd been brought up right, you know, with good work ethics. And his name was Scott. And I knew his brother too. His brother had a lawn service, I had a tree service, and we kind of got together and kind of realized that, hey, you know, maybe we got a good match here for employer-employee relationship. So I hired him. Well, he hadn't been on very long, and one day he comes over and he goes, "Man, I got some exciting news." And I go, "What's that?" He goes, "You know, people have been trying to get a hold of me for about a week or two now. I think it was a week or two. It might have been longer. But," he goes, "they've been trying to get a hold of me because they have some," he goes, "because I submitted an application for the NRA sweepstakes." And I thought, well, that's pretty neat, you know. So I'm thinking, okay, I wonder what he won, you know. But then he goes on to tell me, "Waco, go lay down. Excuse me while I go to a commercial intermission. Waco, go lay down." So anyway, then he goes on to tell me that, he goes, "Not only did I win the NRA sweepstakes," he goes, they kept calling me and I wasn't able, and we didn't match up. He goes, "But when I finally found out what happened was," he goes, "I won the grand prize, which was, I believe, 10 hunting trips valued at $20,000 a piece, if I'm not mistaken. 10 guns, gun safe, a brand new Ford Explorer. What else? All kinds of spotting scopes and hunting clothes and everything you could think of. That if you was to walk into Bass Pro today and just go shopping and just start putting stuff in your cart, you know, he got that plus, you know." So he told me, he goes, "I need to have off at such and such date." And he had just started with me, but I didn't see no problem with it, man. Shoot, if you wanted, because he was going to go on a trip with his dad to Alaska. I mean, we're talking big game hunting there. 11 days, guided hunt in the middle of nowhere. He was fixing to walk in places where there's a good possibility no human being had ever walked before. That's how remote this place was. So I said, "Yeah, no problem." And I first thing I thought of, man, what a lucky fella, you know. And you know, I use that term loosely, lucky. God has a lot to do with a lot of things in our lives that we don't acknowledge him for, and we don't give him credit for, and we don't look at it as a calendar of events that have been set up by him, or a path that has been chosen that we thought we chose, but have really been set up by him. So I said, sure, take off. Man, you guys are going to have a great time, you know. So I told my wife about it and everything. Well, a couple days later, he calls me up, and it's like a day or two before he's ready to leave, and he goes, my dad don't want to go. Now, I don't know Scott all that well at this point. You know, he's a new employee. You know, I heard him a little bit, being his brother, you know, knowing his brother and everything. Well, when he told me that his dad couldn't go, the next thing he said, he goes, he's a little bit nervous about flying. He's nervous about flying in the bush planes, and I don't blame him. You know, I didn't say that then because I didn't know then, and I'll get to that part later on in the story. And again, I want you to know that this is an action adventure video here. This is going to take you from one end of the country all the way to the other end of the country. It's going to allow you to do things that you might not have ever afforded to do yourself. It's going to put you in a position where you're doing things that you've never dreamed of, or no, that you've only dreamed of. Anyway, so he told me, he goes, my dad don't want to go because of the bush plane thing, and he goes, would you like to go with me to Alaska? And I remember being on the phone and turning to my wife Nancy and telling her, hey, listen, I go, Scott Nix, I wasn't supposed to say your last name, sorry about that, Scott. Scott just called me, is on the phone here, and he's asking me if I want to go to Alaska with him. All expenses paid. He goes, you need to bring a tip for the guide, maybe some little bit of personal spending money, you know, for food and such, you know. And I go, it's for 11 days. And I go, what do you think, Nance? And my wife said, you're crazy if you don't go. And I thought about it. I go, well, this is a lot of opportunity of a lifetime. I need to go. So I told Scott, yeah, I'll go. And then he gave me a few things that I might need, and a list, maybe some waders. Waders, by what I mean is like boots that go up around above the knee, like the top of your calves or something. Not the kind that go up around your chest. But that's the type I ended up buying, but I got the wrong type. But then I ended up getting another pair. But anyway, so, you know, I didn't even have a good hunting rifle. So what I thought, the more and more I began to contemplate this thing, the more and more I thought, shoot, you know, Scott had to go through the time and the, I don't know what else you'd call it, but to fill out the application for the NRA sweepstakes, and then submitting it, and then actually, you know, maybe thought he would never win, but he did. So, and I'm thinking, okay, you know, earlier I said that what a lucky guy that guy is, that to be able to do something like that. And then I thought about it, and I said, well, shoot, I'm even luckier than he is. I didn't have to fill out nothing, and I'm on my way to Alaska. So anyway, we're on. Next thing you know, we're at the airport. We're loading our guns up, and we're on the plane, and we're flying over these beautiful, look like craters almost, as we get towards Alaska, with lakes in the tops of the mountain. So I'm assuming it might have been an old crater or something, you know. And I got pictures of that I saved. So next thing you know, we're landing, and first in Washington. We stayed the night there. It was raining. And I heard it's supposed to rain in Washington State pretty much all the time. So anyway, we got on the next plane the next day, and we were on our way to Anchorage, and we landed in, I'm pretty sure it was Anchorage. And we got off and had a chance to go to a little restaurant and get something to eat. And up on the walls was all these pictures of a prior earthquake that happened years ago, and that pretty much wiped out this area. It was just devastating to it. Created a big tidal wave and everything. So a lot of people died in it. So from there, we're flown out on a smaller plane to a place called Lake Clark, I think it was. Lake Clark, and I think it was a national park. All I remember was this big valley and this gravel runway that was long. It could take, when I say long, I'm talking, 600 yards or something like that, maybe 800 yards long. Something where you had room to land, and it could have been a little bit longer, but that was, and there was a community that lived there, and there was I think there was also like a Christian retreat that they had also there, and so we landed there, and I'm watching the one pilot siphon gas out of one plane and put it in another plane that we were going to take. And I'm thinking, well, this is kind of weird. Hope that gas is good, and I hope them pilots are good, and I gotta, this is interesting. They're not pulling up to some kind of pumps or having a fuel truck come out. So we go inside the big hangar there, and there's a lot of people in there. When I say a lot, I'm talking maybe like 10 or 12 people in there, and several of them were fishermen that were getting ready to be flown to another location, and at that location they were going to do some, I think, salmon fishing, and me and Scott were going hunting. But it turns out that there was a remnants of a Pacific hurricane called Hurricane John, if I'm not mistaken, that was coming over. Now, it wasn't a full-fledged hurricane by that time, but it was the remnants of it, and it was, it was raining. The visibility was terrible, and you're flying through some very tall mountains, craggy peaks, and so I hear a bunch of the pilots and the people that are the fishing folks talking about, well, we're just going to delay our trip a little bit. And then our pilot says, I think we can do it. And the key word there was think. And this is where I got to say that Scott's dad made a good choice, because when we were flying on that plane to the next location, it was a hunt camp. I keep wanting to say Jim Harrower was the guide service. Don was our guide, but I can't remember the name. If anybody can get a hold of Scott, if you ever see this video and you can get a hold of me, tell me what his name is, because I like to look that place up again and maybe plan another trip there with my brother. I was going to say surprise trip, but I don't let that out of the bag. Sorry about that. So anyway, we're sitting there, and our pilot says that, I think we can make it. And I'm like, I'm a little bit nervous, because none of the other pilots wanted to fly their fishermen to their location. So we get in the plane and we take off, and it's raining. It's raining, and there's gusts and there's winds, and next thing you know, we're going over these mountains, and man, boom, boom. I mean, we're just dropping and raising, dropping and raising. And I remember, I think it was Scott hit the top of his head, or the pilot one. I can't remember which one. It was one of them hit the top of their head on the ceiling. And I think it was actually bleeding. And right away, I looked over to see if the pilot was still conscious, to make sure that he could still fly the plane. Not that I could do anything, but maybe sing that song, Jesus Take the Wheel, So we're flying. So we end up landing on this big river. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, just out in the middle of nowhere on a gravel bar. Now this runway's a lot shorter. It ain't 1,000 feet or 800 feet or 1,200 feet long. This runway's a lot shorter. Let's just say it's a lot shorter, and they have to go out periodically and pick any rocks out of there that are too big or whatever. So they landed there, and at that time there was another fuel exchange, if I remember correctly, and we're walked up and shown to our cabins. So we bring all our gear in there, and I'm tired, and I can't even remember if we ate dinner that night or not. I just remember I was excited, flying over all that and all the excitement of the landing and all that. I mean, it was, we made it there safely. God protected us. He watches over us. He sure does. Yes, he does, in ways we don't even know. So they say, okay, we're going to fly out the next morning to our actual base camp, and they had another name for it. I can't remember what it was. Oh, God, I wish I could. Sometimes, a lot of time's gone by since all this happened. So I should have put this on video years ago, because we haven't even got to anything exciting yet. You can imagine maybe a friend inviting you to Alaska for 11 days, all expenses paid. Yeah, okay, yeah. And then you might be able to imagine flying through the remnants of a doggone hurricane in a little bush plane. That's oh, by the way, on that plane, as we were going to, I think it was either Fairbanks or Anchorage, when we were flying to the Lake Clark National Park over there, I got to sit in the co-pilot seat, and everybody else was behind me, all the other passengers. This is before the storm. And we're being flown to Lake Clark from the main airport in Fairbanks or Anchorage or wherever it was at. So I can see all the gauges, and it seats about 6 or 8 people and all their gear. And I'm looking up at the all the gauges, and I remember Scott and a bunch of the guys messing around with me, saying, "Now listen, whatever you do, you're not experienced. Don't you grab that other wheel and start trying to fly this thing or anything." Okay, all right. So I look up at the gauges, and the gauge is almost on E, and then I realize how long we've been in the air, and I realize, okay, I'm going to ask the pilot, how far out are we? And the pilot said, well, we're about 30 minutes out still. And I'm like, I look at the gauge again, and I realize that there's not 30 minutes worth of fuel in there compared to what we've been flying. So I look over my shoulder, and Scott and everybody's all sitting there, and I'm trying to get his attention, and I go, kind of pointing up at the gas gauge, unsuspectingly, pointing up there, and all of a sudden, I think his eyes got big, and a couple of the other people, they finally realized what I was doing. And we were right there on E. And now, we're flying along just regularly, but I started to pucker up already. I'm going to tell you right now, I was getting nervous. I'm like, okay, maybe the pilot doesn't realize what's going on. Maybe he ain't looked at his gas gauge. Maybe he's got a fuel leak and didn't know it, and it's leaking. It's expending fuel faster than what I thought. So I'm looking back at Scott, and I'm pointing to the gauge, and finally it was either him or somebody else noticed what I was doing, and that thing was right down on E. And I'm telling you, man, just about that time, I see that pilot reach over and flick a switch, and that gauge he switched over to the other tank. I didn't know there was another tank on there. And I'm telling you right now, I was scared. Did I just admit that? Yeah, I did. And it's true. I was scared. I was nervous. All right? Now, anyway, we make the landing and on the bank there of that big river, and we're shown to our cabin, a little tiny cabin, and we go looking around. There's a sawmill that they had flown in one piece at a time. The cabins, they have a lodge where everybody eats at. They had a big lodge, and there were hunters from all over the world. Germany. There was hunters, and me and Scott, he's the landscaper, and I'm a tree surgeon, and we're sitting at this table amongst these millionaires. One of them developed either the method or the actual stuff that they put around to insulate the Alaskan pipeline. And so we're sitting amongst these folks here and talking, and everybody's excited about the hunt the next day, and being flown out. And they tell us we're going to be flown out early in the morning, or I'm going to be one of us will be flown out early in the morning, and that ended up being me. And Scott was going to be taken down the river on an airboat. Now, I'm from South Florida. I'm used to airboats, but I didn't expect to see one in Alaska. So they began to explain to me that the airboat was flown in. The airboat was flown in one piece at a time, and then reassembled there. Because it's a remote. The only way there was by air. I mean, you could probably walk in, or maybe take a boat up the river or something, but they had to bring them in pieces. The cabins they flew the sawmill in the same way, reassemble it, cut their own timber, built cabins out of it, built a beautiful lodge with a long table, and I still got pictures of that with a big old giant grizzly skin strung up out front from somebody that had shot a grizzly just before I got there. So early morning comes up. We get up early in the morning, and I go out, and there's a mist over the river and stuff, and the pilot's wondering, okay, is that mist going to rise so I can get out of here? So we walk out. Scott's going out and loading his gear on the airboat, right? And I'll walk by, and there's a horseshoe pit. And I reached down, I grabbed up one of them horseshoes and lined up with that pit and tossed it. Ringer. I couldn't believe it. I thought to myself, man, what's the chances of that, man? I ain't even had a good cup of coffee yet, and I done threw a ringer first thing in the morning, man. So Scott gets on the boat, man, and that engine starts up, and that boat spins around, and that gust of that wind coming off them props, man, and he heads on down that river. And so next thing you know, the pilot's saying, okay, that mist or that fog is lifted now, we can go. So I get in this little tiny plane. I load up in this little, I'm talking small. It was so small it didn't have a back seat. It had one front seat, and you had to weigh the amount of gear you had. You're only allowed to bring in so much weight. So I get in the back, and I got one leg on this side of the pilot's seat and one leg on this side of the pilot's seat, and I had a little board that flipped up off the floor that was a backrest. And I'm sitting on the ground with my gear here and there, and we go and we take off, and then we're flying, and it was just so beautiful, so beautiful. And I think I spotted something, a moose or something. Now in Alaska, the first day you fly in, you're not allowed to hunt that day. You have to wait another day. So we fly into this place, and I see he does this big circle, and he goes, okay, that's where we're going to land. I look down, there's no runway. There's no runway. I'm talking, I'm trying to find a reference, okay? If you was to I would say maybe 300 yards of gravel, 200 yards of gravel or something like that. It was just very little gravel. It was a stream bed. It wasn't a riverbed like the other one that had a nice wide gravel or anything. It was just this little stream bed, and it was set down. There was these plateaus. There was the mountains, and the mountains came down like this, and then they reached a plateau that went out about 100 yards, and then it dropped down again, and then that was flat, and then there was a stream that ran through it. And that stream is where we were going to land. And the guy told me, he goes, yeah, they go down there and remove the rocks and stuff in case any rocks get down there, and it looks pretty good today. And so he comes around for that landing, and all of a sudden he just swoops down below, not the mountain ridge, but the plateau. He just comes down real low at that plateau and drops down to that stream bed. And I'm looking, and there's these tall weeds growing and bushes on both sides, and our wings are just clearing them. Not the width-wise, but the height-wise, When I say just clearing them, to me it looked like they were real close, but I would say we had about maybe 6 foot of clearance or something like that on some of them weeds. So, it wasn't much. So it made, that got me nervous. So, but we made the landing, and then all of a sudden this burly looking guy comes running up to the plane, and it looks like he had gotten almost like frost. Like you ever have your skin dry out during the winter, particularly if you're a working man, and you start to get splits in there, and they get sore, and they don't seem to heal up, and I mean, just aching, and just bugging the heck out of you. Well, his hands looked like that, but even worse. So I'm thinking, oh man, this guy's rough, man. What the heck, Well, I didn't know it. He had just got through cleaning. I think it was the bear. It was the rest of the bear that guy had shot, doctor had shot before I got there. So for some reason, when I got off the plane, I started just to mention a little bit about the Lord or something like that, and he right away. Listen, I got a friend. He goes, he's a dentist. He ended up getting saved or whatever that was. He got Jesus. He goes, and he just literally pounded me with it. So I was, all right, maybe I better not say nothing to this guy. He might not want to hear about it. But, the Lord had prompted me to say something to begin with. Otherwise, I wouldn't have said it, So I let it go, and I said, well, I won't say nothing. So go to bed, wake up the next morning, get on my backpack, get my gun. The hut that we're staying in is like a 13-foot or 15-foot wide, and it's a dome-shaped hut, and it was flown in by panels. And just outside the hut, not very far away, was a porta potty, a Jiffy John, a toilet, and so everything was right there. And then down the river was a drying rack and a meat rack and a cleaning station down a little ways, not right up on the stream or anything. So I ended up going to bed. Oh, and the beds were along the walls, and it was just slightly curved all the way around, but it was wide enough where you could sleep on it, and didn't have a problem. It had a stove on the inside. We had blankets. I had all my gear, and temperature's about, 30-something degrees on the inside. There's no snow on the ground yet or anything, but it's cold, real cold. I think it was summertime when we were there, but up in that elevation where we were at, it was cold. He had on a jacket, I had on a jacket. So I go to bed that night, wake up the next morning, we get our gear together, and he gives me some instructions. He goes, whatever you do, he goes, do not lay that backpack down. He goes, you keep that thing on you. That's all your gear, in case we get separated, a fog comes in or whatever happens, you got your emergency stuff in that backpack. So I said, okay. Excuse me. I got to get this chicken. He found his way up on top of this deck, and then we're about 20-something feet or 15 feet or so in the air, and I'm going to let him out. Come on, buddy. Hey, buddy. That's a good girl. That's a good girl. No, wake up. Good girl. Say hi to the camera. All right, we're going to be quiet now, huh? So anyway, let me get back to where I was at. So it gives me these instructions. Don't drop your backpack, stay close, and all that. So we walk outside, and there's these two huge mountain ridges, one on the right, one on the left, and I can see down this long valley, and that plateau goes that flat plateau that come off the mountain where it leveled out, goes all the way down all the way down that both sides, and then that goes down to another flat part of the valley, and that part's about 300 yards wide maybe, and with a stream running down the middle of it. And down at the other end, I could see like this mound, this other mountain ridge or something down at the other end. And it's just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So we head on out now, and we're hiking, and we're hiking, and we're hiking, and we're hiking. And I think we're about, I'd say maybe a mile and a half out, and we stopped to take a break. So at that point, I kind of leaned back against my backpack. We're sitting down. He found a spot to sit down. We got this butt pad that keeps your butt from freezing, on the ground, and I'm sitting on that thing. And I don't know how long we were sitting there. It wasn't very long, just a few minutes. And all of a sudden, we look, and there's this huge. Now he took me over here to hunt caribou, and so that's what I'm expecting at this high elevation. And all of a sudden, across the valley, where the other plateau was, there was a little channel that went up, because we were towards the end of the very end. There was this little channel that came out, and all of a sudden this moose come out of there and come across, and I think they were called elder trees, adder trees or elder trees, and he come over to that stream, and them racks are going back and forth and hitting them things, and I don't know if he's just rubbing them or what, but man, he's all excited. He grabs his binocular and looks at it. Man, he goes, that's more than representative of Alaska. So I'm excited, man. I'm like, oh man, look at this, man. We walked all this way, sat down for a couple minutes, and here comes, well, that moose come through the adler trees, or whatever they're called, and crossed over onto our side of the stream. Now, right now, it's about a 200 yard shot or something, or 150 yard shot, something like that. And he starts going back towards our camp. So he walks faster than I do, mainly because he's got a bigger stride. It's a huge 2,000 something pound moose, maybe 2,500 pound moose. And I got pictures of it. So he starts going back towards our camp. So I got my backpack and my gun, and Don, the hunting guide, he's older than I am. We're on top of the plateau, so we're trying not to let him see us, and we're ducking down and we're running, and I'm trying to keep up. There was one point where I just got I had to cough. You know how you get that scratch, and all of a sudden I'm trying to hide my cough. And I keep looking over, and now he's getting ahead of us now. Now he's 100 yards ahead of us. Now he's 125, and I look, and we had been running. Now finally I'm getting tired. I'm getting winded. And I thought I was in good shape. Now the hunting guide's a lot older than I am, but he's outpacing me. He's used to the altitude. He's in good shape. He's a hunting guide, and I'm a tree surgeon. I'm in good shape. I'm athletic, and here I am. I'm running out of energy. So, I did what he told me not to do. I dropped my backpack. I need to get rid of it. I still have a gun. Matter of fact, it was a borrowed gun. I want to say it was the 30-30 or 30-06. I can't remember now. But anyway, Don's up ahead of me about 50 yards now, and I'm trying to get him. And I can see him looking over that ridge and trying to stay low, and looking over the ridge, trying to keep track of where he's at. And finally, we get to the end of the ridge, and now we're only about 100 yards away from our base camp, spike camp. That was the word I was looking for earlier. It's called a spike camp. This is where you actually do your hunting. It's not where the lodge is at and everything, but it's a spike camp. So I get there. He goes, "Where's your backpack?" I go, "It's back there." He goes, and he threw his down. He goes, "Lay down here and take that shot." So I laid down, and I put it up, and all of a sudden all I could see was this big brown fur, and I realized I had my lens cap on, and it had built up some condensation. So I took off the lens cap, got through the sight, and seen the same doggone thing. I didn't take off the other end. So God's merciful, I'm telling you right now. So I took off the other end, and I just fired a shot at the middle, and then put another one in the chamber and fired it again, and that moose went down. He went down. And I get up, and Don, the hunting guide, goes, "Now you go back there and you go back there and get your backpack." So I run all the way back, it's a few hundred yards, and grab my backpack, and then come running back and work my way down off the plateau down into the river, to the stream, and there's this moose, and he's doggone huge. I mean, I'm talking huge, and we're both admiring him, and he's getting ready to skin him out, and then all of a sudden I hear, I look up, and there's a plane flying over, and it circles around. And all of a sudden it lands down there on that gravel bar. And I look, and they were there to pick me up. We were going to switch out. I was going to go caribou hunting down the lower elevations, and Scott was going to stop Waco, and then Scott was going to come up here and moose hunt. Well, I hadn't got a caribou yet, so Scott gets off the plane with the pilot, and Scott starts telling me about a moose that he shot down in the lower elevations. I said, "Well, that's great, man." He's telling me, and so we start walking out back because we went to meet the plane. We start walking back to where my kill was. And as we're walking back, Scott's telling me about this moose. And, we're Florida hunters. It doesn't take a whole lot of moose antler to impress us. I'm going to tell you right now. I wouldn't have known a small moose from a big moose. All I know is the one I just shot was extremely large. And I didn't know at the time, but the rack ended up being 5 feet across. I mean, absolutely beautiful. Very representative, more than representative of the average hunt in Alaska. So we're walking back out there, and Scott's walking with us. He just got off the plane, and Don is walking with us out there, and Scott's talking, and all of a sudden we get up close to my moose, and all of a sudden he gets real quiet. I didn't know what it was, you know what I mean? Then he just simply told me, "Well, mine ain't quite that big." I said, "All right, well, good. At least you got one. That's good, So